Hello, and welcome to Teatime Oddities, the podcast where we explore the strange and the unusual throughout history. I'm your host Danielle, and today we will be discussing the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum heist. So, pop the kettle on, grab a warm cup of tea, and let's get started. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. I hope you're all doing well and that you had a good month of July. I am excited to talk about this episode today as someone who loves art. It's both, a cool topic, but also kind of a sad one. I really want to say thank you guys again so much for listening. And I'm so excited to have the podcast on Spotify now. And I really hope that everyone is enjoying it. And yeah, so let's talk about the tea. The tea that I'm drinking today is an Earl Grey spiced chai, which honestly I wasn't expecting to like because it seems like too many flavors, but it was actually really good. So if you like Earl Grey or you like chai or you like both, then give it a go. All right, let's get into the episode. In the early morning of March 18th, 1990, in Boston, Massachusetts, security guards Rick Abbott and Randy Hestend were going about their patrols in the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. To make things easier on my already fried brain, I'm just going to call it the Gardner Museum from now on. So, yeah. At 1:20 a.m., two police officers showed up at the museum claiming they were responding to a disturbance call. Despite it being against regulation, Abbott allowed the officers to enter the museum at 1:45. Abbott began to question the legitimacy of the police officers almost immediately, with the taller officer's mustache appearing to be fake. Abbott radioed for Hestend to return to the desk. The officers then demanded for Abbott to come out from behind the security desk and identified him as a wanted man. They pushed Abbott against the wall and subdued him. Hestend entered shortly after, and he was handcuffed. These so-called policemen then revealed that they were actually there to rob the museum, and they asked the guards to remain calm and that they shouldn't try anything. To further ensure that the guards would not cause problems, the thieves wrapped their faces completely in duct tape and handcuffed them to a pipe in the basement of the museum. This all occurred in under 15 minutes. The path the thieves took is well documented thanks to the new security system the museum had in place. The thieves began in the Dutch room, which was located on the second floor. The first two works to be taken were The Storm on the Sea of Galilee and A Lady and Gentleman in Black. A self-portrait of Rembrandt was also removed from the wall, but the thieves did not take it with them, probably due to the painting's large size. For the sake of avoiding confusion, I'm just going to discuss the path the thieves took from now on and then state what paintings were stolen after. The men entered the hallway in the gallery and yet again made efforts to steal works but saw them as too time-consuming and left them there. They also stole work from the Blue Room, but strangely their movements were not picked up by the museum sensors. The thieves then returned to the basement and checked on their hostages, even asking if they were comfortable. The men then headed to the security office to retrieve the footage from the CCTV and the record of their movements about the museum in an attempt to destroy it. However, they left behind a hard drive that backed up all of this information. The robbers made their final exit at 2:45 a.m., making the robbery approximately 81 minutes in total. Later that morning, the next shift of guards arrived at the museum, but they began to worry when they could not get into contact with Abbott and Hestend. The security director entered the building and located the men in the basement, still handcuffed to the pipe and faces encased in duct tape. In total, 13 artworks were stolen: The Concert by Vermeer, The Storm on the Sea of Galilee, and A Lady and a Gentleman in Black, both by Rembrandt. Landscape with Obelisk by Flink, Chez Torini by Manet, Self-Portrait by Rembrandt, 5 works by Degas: La Sortie de Paysage, Cortège en environ de Florence, Programme for the Artistic Soirée 1, Programme for the Artistic Soirée 2, and the 3 mounted jockeys. In ancient Chinese gu, which is a bronze vessel from the Shang and Zhou dynasties, which is around 1600 BC. And finally, a French imperial eagle finale, which is a decorative piece on top of a flagpole. These 13 works are valued around 200 million US dollars, and it could also be up to nearly 600 million US dollars. It varies so much just because, now that they've been stolen, they kind of have more value. This heist is considered the highest value museum theft in history. The FBI took the case almost immediately and almost as quickly hit a wall. There's almost no physical evidence, making this already tough case nearly impossible to solve. Fingerprints and footprints found at the scene could not be traced to anyone. Considering it was a museum, it's pretty hard to know who was a gallery goer and who was a thief. The eyewitness reports also varied greatly. Some said one of the thieves was 5 feet 9 inches with a medium build and likely in his late 30s, while others said the thief appeared to be in his early 30s with a heavier build and was closer to 6 feet 1 inches. There are some suspects in the case despite its sparse evidence. The first suspect was none other than the security guard Rick Abbott. The FBI saw his behavior prior to the robbery as strange. It was seen on the security sensors that Abbott opened and closed a door while on his patrol. Abbott maintained that he often did this to ensure the door was locked. However, the investigators saw this as a possible signal, maybe used to let the thieves outside know it was safe to enter. Considering the museum sensors were also always on, the security office double-checked what Abbott had said, and he had never done this before. It was also odd that while the thieves had entered the Blue Room, only Abbott's footsteps were registered earlier in the morning. But the FBI determined that Abbott and Hestand both were innocent. The FBI also stated that they did not feel Abbott and Hestand were sophisticated enough to pull off this heist. Which, while I'm sure they were relieved to not be suspects, kind of a backhanded compliment saying they're not smart enough to do this, but, I guess it's better than being accused of a crime. There were others who were considered to be suspects, but nothing ever came of those leads. There was also a letter that was sent to the museum in 1994, seemingly trying to negotiate a return of the artworks. Apparently, the heist was done to reduce a prison sentence, but it was not successful and they had no longer needed the artworks. The pieces were said to be in a climate-controlled room in a non-common law country. There was also information in the letter that only the FBI and the museum were aware of, giving the claims legitimacy. The writer wanted immunity for themselves and everyone involved, as well as $2.6 million transferred to an offshore bank account. If the museum was interested in this exchange, they were to print a coded message in the Boston Globe, which they did. Following that, another letter was received stating that they saw the museum's interest in negotiations, but the culprits were fearful of the investigation and being caught, so they needed time to think over the deal. There was sadly never another letter sent. The Gardner Museum currently has a $10 million reward to anyone who has a lead that finds a safe return of these pieces. This case remains unsolved to this very day. This case is still seen as active, and the search for the works is still underway. While doing my research, I was on the FBI website, and I actually found that they had a podcast on there called Inside the FBI, and it was a recent upload actually, and it covers this story. So if you'd like to hear more about this theft, check that, because they have interviews with people who actually worked on the case, so it's very interesting. It has been over 3 decades since this crime took place, and the works are still missing. The crime itself is not what makes this case upsetting, but it's rather the loss of these culturally significant works of art. It is a devastating loss for the art world and for the museum. The frames hang barren in the gallery, waiting for their artworks to return. The museum unfortunately has not seen an influx of visitors because of the notoriety of the thefts, because ultimately, people want to see the artworks. While it is sad that these artworks are still missing, there is still always a possibility that they could turn up someday. I'm hoping that does happen because I would love to see these pieces. I do know that I've studied some of these in our history class, and it's just sad to know that they're not in a place where people can appreciate them. But I do hope one day that they'll find their way back to the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. You can find a full list of my sources in the description. You can also follow me on Instagram at Teatime Oddities. I post photos related to the episodes as well as odd stories in the middle of the month. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Teatime Oddities. Make sure to keep the kettle on and check in next month. Goodbye.